It's really funny because most of our life is actually extremely pleasurable. It's just us thinking that it's not or wanting to rush through it that ruins it, right? Like doing the dishes or cooking a meal, if you don't have anything to do after and you're just chill, like it really can be lovely.
Hey, this is Cate Stillman with Thrive with Cate, formerly the Yoga Healer podcast, and I'm here with the repeat serial guest, Brett Larkin of Uplifted Yoga. I think we ran into each other when I was I was just super impressed with your YouTube channel and your online yoga teacher trainings, and you've really scaled that business. And we've talked about that a bunch on the podcast before for Wellness Pro Academy. And I just wanted to have a conversation today that's just more of two yogi business owners who've been in it for decades, right? And what is the sort of the raising kids? I'm at midlife. You're not yet at midlife, but what is this version of just a down home conversation and what we're into and what we're realizing and what we maybe have been experiencing or researching lately? Because I think that in itself is crazy fascinating. So I'll let you go first.
Well, always happy to be here, Cate. So always love my conversations with you and your incredible community. You've inspired so many aspects of my practice, as you know, as we talked about when you were on my podcast. So yes, there's a tension that's very real, I think, when you're a healer and someone who's very introspective, which probably most people listening to this are. And then the tension of that with running a business and scaling a business, right? Having a bigger team, as both you and I do. So when you were asking before we hit record, what's present, that's very present for me. It's how do I still stay in the joy of my business, still have that childlike enthusiasm for it while embracing the aspects of it that challenge me, right? Like managing other people. And there's just so much, and I'm trying to think of the busy task office work that, yes, you can outsource everything under the sun. And there's still certain things that are going to get escalated to you and brought back to you as a business owner. And so to me, that's a very interesting intersection of how are you deeply spiritual, deeply introspective, deeply empathetic on your practice of evolution, sharing that with your tribe while still managing a business, which asks us to really be in the more structured, masculine or yang pole a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it I think it's interesting too with parenting and the household, mm-hmm. right? Just for me, there's a lot of food, of being the one who feeds the household to some degree. That's my domain. And then there's the parenting and being in flow, these, we could say dharmas that are very flow oriented and very non-time linear and so nourishing, so in the flow, in the river, right? And then it's go build a fire. It's the business, go do that thing. And that, right? When there's a tension there, it can feel for me, what am I doing? Which one do I want to do more of? And
it's interesting that you bring that up because we could talk about that word dharma, which I'm sure you have a lot of interesting things to say about, but I was reading the Gita last night, coincidentally, a new translation of it that I got my hands on. And the translator actually had an interesting part in the preface where he was talking about how multifaceted the Gita is, the multiplicities in it, and that dharma, you have multiple dharmas. So it's you have your dharma as a parent, which is different from your dharma as a business. I think pop spirituality has really simplified dharma to be your life purpose, but it's we don't have one life purpose because we're multifaceted. We are children to parents. We are parents to children. We are business owners. We are, going after that moksha, that liberation. There's so much. And so that idea of multiple dharmas, I found really interesting and really empowering, because then an interesting question becomes like, what do you do when those dharmas are in conflict or in opposition, which is exactly what Arjuna faces right on the battlefield. Cause he's like, okay, I feel like my dharma as a human is to like be a good person and not kill people. Yet at the same time, my cousins are going to kill me unless I do something. And Krishna tells him when dharmas or identities are in conflict, that you need to rise to the macro dharma. Like you need to elevate. And I mean, it's very bizarre the way it works in that text, but he says actually like Krishna goes into this whole thing, as I'm sure you know, and some listeners may know, he talks about Atman, how we're all the same, like Cate, you and me are the same. We're the same as pigeons and squirrels. Like we all have this part of ourselves that identifies with Brahman, universal consciousness, which makes us all interconnect. It's not even like we're interconnected. It's like we are literally the same thing. And I could come back as a squirrel, and like you could come back as my daughter's daughter in a future lifetime, like whatever. But it's interesting, right? Because in that moment, ultimately what Krishna and Arjuna arrive at is the idea that he needs to take action. Like he can't be paralyzed and not make a decision. And it's a little almost like he's like, everyone's going to die anyway. Like either you kill your cousins or they kill you. Like you need to take action. And weirdly enough, it's like you need to fight ultimately ends up being what he tells him. So I'm not sure what we take away from that in terms of parenting and business, but I do think this idea that we have multiple destinies or we have multiple purposes that we're living out simultaneously is very rich. It's a very interesting idea.
Yeah. And how that's changing, you know, we could even see that in culture, right? Like when we invented birth control, like all of a sudden the role of women as provider changed from like women as provider in the household to women as provider in the marketplace. And so much of what, if we see like, okay, well, many of us who are in, you know, in wellness work, are female and have children or grandchildren. And we're a bit in the mix of all this cultural redefining. So one of the ways that I've been navigating it, and I'm curious about you, but for me, it's like, and you and I had a conversation about this not too long ago, just about like joy of like tuning into like where, well, in the Vedic, in the tantric terms of like following the Shakti, like follow the energy, follow the desire, follow that which is nourishing. And I think for a lot of women now who've sort of lost that, we feel like dried up, like literally you feel like your ovaries dry up, or you feel like your juiciness dries up and you're just in the linear, I've got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, got to do that, got to do the other thing. And then I'll be able to do what I want. And what I'm trying to do more as more of a type A focus driven entrepreneur is like to back it out to like, do what you want now. Like what needs to get done? And then like, how do I really get in the spirit of what I'm doing and really enjoy the process and start to navigate, like really orchestrate, navigate to what in this particular phase of my life, in this incredibly dynamic world we live in. And those who are parents, like it's dynamic by nature because your kids are changing so fast, so that any household rhythm is dynamic based on that. And then for those of us who are, you know, in the workplace, like work is changing, AI is going to change things. And it already has changed a lot of things. COVID changed the global market economy significantly. Like there's so much change in dynamicism, right? With that, it's like how to be so adaptable to like, you know, you can't set a plan and think it's going to work for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on a big scale, you can, but on like the small of like what gives you joy, like I'm finding the more flexible and adaptable I am with my team and with what responsibilities we need to take now, and running more sprints, like both as a family and as a team, where it's like, let's focus on this one thing right now and move it forward because we're excited about it right now. That's working a lot better than some of these more, I would say, you know, when we have an idea of something, how it should be, and we're not able to live it right now, and how much uncomfortable tension that brings to our everyday experience.
I think what you're talking about, which is so relevant I think, everywhere right now is like, what does it mean to run a business as a woman? Or what does female leadership look like? Because everything we've had so far, including how we built our businesses, like literally it's just us acting like men or mimicking the male way of doing things. Not male as in like gender, but as in the energetics of it, right? Where there's a lot of structure. For example, I had a mentor years ago who talked to me about how she time blocked her day. So like every part of her day was scheduled and like that worked really well for her. And it was like, I couldn't imagine like a more, to me, that structure was so rigid. It felt actually toxic that it was like repulsive to me. I was like, how can you do that? Right? Because what I think a lot of people are figuring out, and it seems like you're already leaning into this, is if we go with pleasure first, pleasure is a generative energy. So it gives you more Shakti, like more energy. So pleasure is so energy generating and it's so overlooked as a skill. So if like you can get into pleasure first and do what's exciting to you, all the like quote unquote hard work that comes after that, instead of gluing your butt to the chair in order to have to do, it comes easier. Like you can actually feel inspired to do it. And I can talk a little bit about polarity if you want here and how that looks like in my own practice, if you want, because that was really helpful for me in unlocking all of this.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So in running a business, there are tasks that we have to do that are challenging and that we maybe don't feel like doing. For example, our taxes, or for example, accounting, or I don't know about you, but I still pay my whole team myself from my bank. Like I don't have someone I trust to like go into my bank. I have an accountant prepare everything for me, but like that is still something I do and I don't enjoy it. There's all these verification codes. I need to check things. Like so there's always going to be grunt work and scary things as well. Like I just had to email everyone to endorse my book, right? Like that wasn't comfortable to like sit down and have to do all those asks. Like my, free form goddess energy would much rather like sit and do Sufi circles in my bedroom or like dance to some fun music than do any of those things. But what I think has changed the game for me, or what I've recently figured out, is really thinking of myself as almost a split personality, like a Jekyll and Hyde, where there is the part of me that wants zero structure and total erratic freedom and chaos, which I know we talked about a little bit recently, which is like the essential nature of what the feminine is. She's constantly unsatisfied. She always wants more. So those of you who like always want more, that's totally normal. That's like the essence of the feminine pole, right? Totally normal. Like think of it as like smoke, right? Always changing, metamorphosizing, constant movement, like unfulfilled, like even like 16 orgasms, like still unfulfilled, right? Like it's always going to want more love, more fun, more pleasure. It's insatiable. And then on the other side, we have, you can visualize a tree as opposed to smoke, right? Like a tree has a lot of structure. It has deep roots. It has a little bit of yield, if the wind blows it and such, but for the most part, it's anchored. It's completely stable. And what works, I find really well, and this is all, again, just polarity basics, is that when you do pleasure first, and say you have a new course you want to birth into the world, I'm sure a lot of your listeners could relate to that idea, or a new program, and you really let your, like goddess, divine feminine energy connect with how passionate you are about it, how much you love it, how much you want it, how much you crave it, the yearning, the desire. That like, even as I'm talking about this, I'm feeling more energy in my pelvis and in my spine, because again, we're talking about a generative, creative energy. And then you got to really inspire yourself with it. And then you ask your divine masculine, which is that tree, that structure, from a place of devotion to the vision, to do all the grunt work we talked about previously. And when I teach about this, I like to use the movie The Princess Bride, which is like, hopefully many people are familiar with that movie. It's kind of a classic. If you're not, at the beginning of the movie, there's this Princess Buttercup, and she has this farm boy on her farm named Wesley. And the whole opening of the movie, she's just stating desires like, farm boy, get me water. Farm boy, chop me wood, right? She's just, and every single time he gets on his knees and he just says, as you wish, as you wish. And then the narrator eventually says, what she figured out as he does all these like grunt work tasks is that she figured out that when the farm boy was telling her, as you wish, what he was really saying is, I love you. And if you can create this buttercup Wesley farm boy dynamic inside your own being, right? So, because most of us, we're not inspiring our divine masculine to like go do the things for us. Because when that part of yourself is inspired, it's going to like those emails, the scary emails that you have to write, they're going to flow out of you. Now, I'm not going to say it's not going to feel a little bit uncomfortable at times, but you're going to be lit up because you're doing it in devotion of your vision, in devotion of, you know, your feminine nature that's like birthing and generating this thing. And the way I've really reframed this, Cate, is like thinking of my business as the greatest love story that was ever told between me and me, right? Like a me and me love story. And like in some of the things I've been teaching, like that's literally how I open it. I'm like, your business, because I think most of your people listening to this is in business, it has the opportunity for you to look at it as the greatest love story ever told. If you inspire yourself and then you do the hard work for yourself from a place of devotion. But this is why the pleasure needs to come first, kind of just like you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, one of the ways that I do it too, especially the hard things, like the things that you're talking about, where there's just this level of tapas or friction, where there's a bit of resistance, where it's like, you know, it needs to get done. You know, you're the person that needs to do it. Right. And you know, there's a way to get into the spirit of it. And so understanding how we respond to resistance individually. Because like for me, it goes to like unique abilities and personality type. Like I'm a super high quick start. So if we talk about a project right now, I'll want to do it immediately. And like, I can like go like full tilt really fast on it. Cause I'm like a quick start. Like I don't like to analyze and reflect and do research. I just like to go all in and just like go do it. So then what happens to me with like project planning or things that I put off or that maybe are I've been in the hopper for a while and need to get done is like, I have got to come back to that quick start energy. So just like you're saying in terms of the devotion, I call that like getting in the spirit of it. Like, how do I get into that same energetic spirit of the thing that needs to get done? So say it is books, say we need, say we do need, what are they called when you get the attributions for books?
Blurbs.
Blurbs. Thank you. Technical term. So we need blurbs. We need to write to like 50 people and get blurbs. It's like, how do we so get in the spirit of the essence of the reader reading the blurb from the person who wrote the blurb? So say I want a blurb from Brett, and I'm thinking of like, how will my members feel when Brett has a one-liner about primal habits? And then I'm like, what will Brett really think about primal habits? Right. And like, which primal habit for her will be the one that she's like, I didn't know that one. Like, I want to try that one. Or like that one, wow, the research on that was like mind blowing. You know, so it's like, how do I get in the spirit of that before I send the email to Brett? So then it's not a task to do, but it's like me actually connecting with the essence of the outcome. So the same thing's true with like cooking a meal, right? So if it's like, okay, because I know a lot of people have, you know, a drudgery around nourishment. And I'm like, wait, whoa, it's like back off, because I've had that and I know where that comes from. But it's like, what are we really doing? So if we walk into the kitchen, it's like, what are we really doing? What do we really want from this? Is it sustenance? Is it connection? Is it like hypernutrification? Is it a process, a relaxing process? Because maybe that's what we want, is just a relaxing, repetitive process when you go in the kitchen, that we do things in a way that's super orderly and almost like a meditation, so that we relax into the flow of what we're doing if we're preparing a meal for a family. So yeah, back to you.
No, I mean, I love that. It's coming back into the intention and the energy, like, and I'm going to use this because I also, it's really funny because most of our life is actually extremely pleasurable. It's just us thinking that it's not, or wanting to rush through it, that ruins it, right? Like doing the dishes or cooking a meal, if you don't have anything to do after and you're just chill, like it can be lovely, especially if you put on like some Italian music. Like I love to do, like, we make life so difficult for no reason with tasks like the ones we're talking about, which is so great because they don't get talked about enough. One thing I've really done is I don't push myself to do it. Like a lot of times I'd use like, oh, write all these and then you can go for a run, or you can have a reward after you send 10 emails. And that's the way a lot of like early mentors of mine actually trained me to think. And I mean, it's effective, and but it's kind of like like you're kind of punishing yourself.
It's totally masculine. So it's the trigger,
and it's totally masculine, right? Like it works, but you just have to turn into a man in order to do that. So if you're not interested in that, like you need to find another way, which I think is what so many people are figuring out right now, which is why this is an exciting conversation. Having trust, this idea of like Ishvara Pranidhana, has been huge for me, because I often, if I'm feeling a lot of resistance to doing something, I just say, I trust that I will be in the mood to do this later. And that is very powerful, because unless it's a life or death emergency, I mean, most emails don't need to be responded to in time. Like even my people on payroll, if it's like, if it's 24 hours late, or like, they're not going to freak out. Like, it's okay. It's okay. I can pay for the bank to send it to them faster. I can pay extra to do that, so it still gets to them on time. Like, you really can give yourself some grace. And I found the more I just trust, like I trust that this is my dharma, meaning this must get done. And I'm surrendering. Like, I know God, universe, like you will make this easy for me at a point in time when it's supposed to be. And when I think that way, very often, like sometimes it's a couple hours later, like I go do something pleasurable, like a swim, or go for a walk, and then sure enough, like I built all this generative Shakti energy. Like I'm so like just in my body and juicy and feeling great. It's like, oh yeah, no big deal to do that, right? Or it might be a week later. Sometimes it's been 2 weeks later. But all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling so like my cup runneth over with pleasure right now, that I'm like willing to do that. So that's one tip for folks, especially if you are like type A, like Cate and I, because you want to push and you want to punish yourself because that feels normal and familiar and safe. So it can feel very unsafe to be like, no, I'm going to go for a walk and like procrastinate the thing. Cause that's the number one thing we were taught not to do in school and all these other places. But if you can trust, the trust is so critical. You need to trust that God, or whatever you call source, the unified field of awareness, whatever, that it wants everything that needs to get done, and it's going to move it through you in the right time. And it's hard for me to believe sometimes. I'd still rather go in and push, but the more I've been able to do this, the more that I see it works. And then more to your point, Cate, which I'm totally going to try, because what you were describing was almost like setting a little bit of an intention for like, how do I want cooking this meal to make me feel? Or it's like, I'm gonna have to cook this meal anyway. So like, what's the essence of it? Like, I'm sure there's a great Ayurvedic word here you could throw out, like the core energetic component of it that I want to flavor the experience with, right?
Oh, bhavana. Yeah.
Thank you. Say it again.
Bhavana.
Yeah. That I want to bring to it. If that doesn't come naturally to you, like you can play with archetypes, which is something I love to do, which is basically just like calling on an archetypal energy to be with you in that process. So for example, when I do my billing, I really call on Lakshmi, and I'm just like, I want to feel abundant as I send huge checks to people and pay people. And I really seduce myself and get in the mood of like her energy. So a lot of times when I've had a lot of resistance to doing like billing or finance stuff, I'm just like, I'm going to get dressed up. I'm going to take myself out somewhere really nice to eat where I know there's Wi-Fi. I'm going to bring my computer. I'm going to have like a decadent meal. I'm going to just be feeling like so abundant and so, again, cup runneth over with like that energy of Lakshmi with the coins dripping from her fingers. And I'm like paying people. And it just starts to feel like, oh, yes, and, but I do that very intentionally by calling in like her energy. So there's so many archetypes that can help us. I also use Artemis a lot. I use Athena a lot. Kali, obviously a huge favorite, but and then there's also like the energy of the mother, right? Like sometimes when I'm cooking or cleaning, or it's like the archetype of kind of like the gardener or that Demeter Hestia type of energy of like tending to things, right? Yeah. So that's just another trick in the toolkit if people fancy it.
Yeah, I love that. Deity practice. This is like the old form of polytheistic deity practice where you call on the attributes to help you do something, some endeavor. Yeah.
Yeah, because those codes are in all of us. We just need to activate them, right? You just need to choose to activate them.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Another thing that I love to do that's really on the non-delay, the not delaying of what you want to do in the moment, while still moving forward on the thing that you don't want to do in the moment, but feel some urgency around needing to get done, is I use the quest. So I use a question. So say like for me in the summer, I like to mountain bike, and I like to mountain bike for a couple of hours. And I consider it work. So I don't consider it recreation or fitness, even though I'm probably burning 800 calories an hour. I consider it work. And so what I do is so if I have a number of projects that are my deliverables, I will come up with a question. So I'll take the project that I have the most resistance around, or the most blockage around, or I'm like the least excited about, but it needs to get done probably the most. And I'll chisel a question, and I'll just ask that question. So that's my intention at the ride, is the quest. It's a quest. This is a ride. I'm on a quest. And then I start going. Now on the ride, I might listen to specific podcasts around that. If I need education, I'll watch some like YouTube videos, like maybe some shorts on that, or not listen because I'm riding. Or I might just do music. I might do silence and allow my thoughts to allow it to come in. But I love that. Like for me, it's become like yesterday I did a 3-hour hard ride, like 3,000 vertical feet. It was my third day riding back to back after getting back from being like veg in like Europe and in India, where it was like just too hot to do anything besides yoga. And I come back and I'm like, I should be tired, but I'm so energized because of the quest that I'm on, and I'm getting these downloads or these insights or these activators that make me then super eager to come back and work on the thing and do the thing.
No. Oh my gosh. I love that. I do similar things. I don't think I've ever thought of it as clearly as the way you just put it. It sounds to me like you're basically putting yourself in a flow state, which is like the perfect thing to do when you have a very challenging question. Because it's like you could just sit in the same energy of the question stumping you, or you could get into your zone of genius or get into a flow state, whatever that is for you. For some people, it might be a long walk, sitting in the bath.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell you how many of my students in Mastermind, like we have a boxer thing, they always are boxering me like in the bath, right? Like, because they're just like in their flow state and they're like, oh, I have this, brilliant insight or question or whatever. But yeah, so I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's also awakening energy, right? It's like, let's get the Shakti, the Kundalini moving. And from there, you're always going to see things in a new perspective. So, and something else that struck me as you said that is how often we think of, when you talked about the bike ride not being recreation, we have this tendency to think about, especially as women, I think, the things that fill us up or feel pleasurable as if they are recreation, like as a waste of time. Yeah. Right? Like that was very core to my belief system. Yeah. Because it's not being productive. And like, this is so backwards because in one of my, programs, I talk about your like uplifted operating procedure, meaning like, what is your conscious energy protocol in a sense to like get you feeling lit up and amazing. And if you don't know the buttons, knobs, and dials to push to get yourself in that state, that is a huge problem. Yeah. And if you can get yourself in that state, it's like everything else is going to be easy.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I coached Body Thrive for a decade, like every week. And it was like the same thing of just like these habits, these circadian rhythm habits, like make you feel really good. So just get them automated, like get them dialed in, right? So you're not even thinking about them. And now you're just like, wow, I feel great when I wake up in the morning and I do things that make me feel even greater. And it's easy.
Yeah. It's like having that baseline, which I think your framework is so good at getting people with. And then it's like, then you can personalize it. Like, what's the extra little thing that like you need? Or like, is it enjoying like a matcha while you watch your neighborhood wake up? I like to do that sometimes. I just sit on my front step. It's filling me up somehow. Is it certain clothes or totem items that you wear? Like there's so many little levers that we can hack and pull that get us in our unique frequency or get us in that like Kundalini awakened state that we often don't pull on, or it would be like, oh, it's a waste of time to like wash your hair or pick out a really pretty outfit. I'm not teaching today. And it's like, no, actually, this is part of my uplifted operating procedure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like vital. And that's so personal to each and every one of us. So really investigating that, notice when you're feeling good, notice when you're feeling lit up and amazing. It's like, what's happening? What are you wearing? What are you eating? Who are you around? Like, what did you do that morning? And really designing something.
Yeah. So talk more about Kundalini awakening and the misconceptions and what you're leaning into in your teaching.
Yeah, I know we wanted to touch on that, and it's such a misunderstood concept. I think a couple key things.
Start by defining Kundalini. I'm just all of a sudden I'm like, right. Okay, let's back up.
Right. Well, if we wanted to define, okay, that's interesting. The classical definition or the idea that people have around this is that there is a storehouse of energy. Some people say it's at the base of the spine. Some people say it's at the dantian point, which would be kind of like behind your third chakra, but lower, like between your third chakra or between your belly button and your tailbone. So if you have a hand on your, or a finger on your belly button and a finger on your tailbone, and we draw a diagonal line backwards, it would be in the center there. However, you're also going to see depictions of it as living in the first chakra or your tailbone. It's Kundalini is the coiledness of a serpent. So it often has this allegory of a snake. And the traditional idea is that this energy is dormant within you, and then it shoots up your spine and you feel ecstasy, you feel bliss. It's essentially like an instantaneous state of samadhi. And there's a lot of problems with this definition, in my opinion, that we've been handed down. So many. So the first big paradigm shift I'd invite for listeners around this concept of Kundalini is that, yes, we do have a lot of energy closer to our genitals, right? Like that is a storehouse of energy, of power. There's no question around that. But the Kundalini is an orbit, meaning it's always traveling up Sushumna Nadi and then down the vagus nerve or down Ida Impingala in a loop, up and down. So it's a continual orbit. So thinking of it as an orbit rather than this volcano that shoots up you is really important. And I think for most of us, we just have some kind of misalignment or small blockages, either at an energetic level within our chakra systems. Chakras may be excessive or deficient. Either way, the energy gets trapped there, right? Either the energy can't flow through or it's just like buzzing in there. If it's excessive, like a beehive, like either way, the energy gets trapped. Or there might be actual physical blockages, meaning, a section of your spine is misaligned or your pelvis has a torsion, so the orbit is almost like, people can't see me, but it's like I'm limping a little bit, right? Like the orbit's not really fully functioning in the full way that it could. So thinking of Kundalini energy as an orbit is extremely essential. There's also a mini Kundalini orbit that goes horizontally around the heart center. So those of you who've ever seen the visual of like a Celtic cross, it's very similar to that kind of which again is so different than like the volcanic eruption that I was taught for like my initial 10 years studying Kundalini. So that's the first thing, is to really reframe Kundalini as an orbit. The second thing is to reframe, or the paradigm shift that I'm inviting in for folks, is that your Kundalini awakening is a Kundalini reawakening. And this dovetails so well with all your work in Ayurveda, Cate, because as we know from Ayurveda, the idea is that you are perfectly formed, right? And then life happens to you and your environment is perhaps not ideal as you're growing up, and you move from your Vakriti to your Prakriti, right? Or did I have that reverse? I have this correct?
Yeah. Well, imbalance Vikruti, Prakriti is natural state.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. I think so you are born with your Kundalini in full force. So when we look at children and when we look at little tiny beings, like they have this energy flow happening naturally, right? Like it's your birthright. And then it's what happens to you, kind of like in the Ayurvedic system, all these small misalignments. We learn different programs. We learn what earns love from our parents. We learn what not to do that doesn't earn love. Like we learn all these behaviors. We're also shaped by society and our teachers and God knows what else, big T and little t traumas, potentially like physical abuse or some sort of accident or broken, but like all this stuff happens. And again, that orbit kind of gets off kilter. But when you reframe the Kundalini being awakened as your birthright, it starts to feel less like this scary thing that is like mystical. And it's more like, oh, and then this is the third big paradigm shift, is that the Kundalini awakened is going to look different for you than it is for me. It's like a coming fully into yourself. So my Kundalini awakening is like Brett becoming more Brett. Your Kundalini awakening is Cate becoming more Cate. So instead of it becoming this like static samadhi state, it's actually like you embodying and moving through life in your fullest 10 out of 10 volume turned up, or your like most potent flavor of you that's accessible. And then in that state, obviously you're magnetic. Things become so easy. People are insanely attracted to you because there's so few people that have this energy like freely flowing. So when people do, it's like, forget writing sales funnels and ads, you guys. Like if you can just get in this energetic state and really speak to people, they're going to be magnetized towards you, right? Because it's so rare that we see someone who's authentically embodied and, you know, orbiting that energy up and down in a way that just enhances their unique essence, their unique frequency. Like that's what we're all craving. And it's like the most attractive thing on the planet when you see someone who's just owning themselves, right?
Yeah.
One more thing I would like to say about Kundalini awakening. You're going to be like, oh my goodness, shouldn't have asked. But this is the last one. And it's really important, is that some people do have spontaneous Kundalini awakenings. And I have people come to the Kundalini training and that's why they're coming, right? They've had something happen, could be a breakup, could be some sort of accident, like, but they have a ton of energy flowing way too quickly. They're getting migraines. It's debilitating. And that's called like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. They might have not even ever done yoga, right? It's like all of a sudden this is just happening. And that's basically like, I use the analogy of like, you're sitting on a wild stallion, like holding on for dear life, when what we want is like a really healthy orbit in a trot where like I have reins and I can canter or I can slow down. Like we want to be able to calibrate this energy, not to be like holding on for dear life. So that happens, but it's a very small percentage of people who are going to have that spontaneous, like huge energy release. I would say like less than 2% of the population. And I think what can happen is like the rest of us can feel kind of like losers because like that hasn't happened to us, or we haven't seen white lights in meditation, or like, hey, I traveled to India and I did all the things and I didn't have this like eat, love, pray moment, whatever that book's called, like where visions and angels sang to me. And one thing I would encourage you to think about is that every time you clear an energetic blockage, every time you open up to something new in your body, every time you get body work done, every time you respond instead of react in a situation with a partner or parent, every single one of those like mini moments is the Kundalini reawakening, because it's already awakened and coming into full orbit. So something that I've really been embracing is this idea that I'm actually living this insane Kundalini awakening. It's just over a 12-year period. And that doesn't make it any less profound, because there's literally so many moments in my interaction with my spouse or how I'm running my business where I'm just like, holy moly, or even just the way I'm showing up. Like I'm going to release a music album soon. Like I'm singing now. Like it's like, these are things I would never have done before. And it's because the energy is slowly like awakened and awakened and awakened. And I'm feeling braver and I'm feeling more like confident to be myself. It's just, I never had, the volcanic eruption. But it's, and most of the people listening to this probably are going through a Kundalini awakening, right? It's just subtler. It's just slower. And that doesn't make it any less valid. Like you are, I would say, on the path and just as valid as the folks who are, having these like spontaneous power surges, essentially, which then is actually a more challenging situation because then they need to learn how to tame the horse. The power surge can cause a breakdown, right? Like a power outage, where they then enter like a big depression. So just to really let people feel seen in that, because no one said that to me, but it's what I say to myself. And it makes me feel very validated in my experience.
Yeah, totally. I have had someone say that to me. And it was really like, I don't know, it's maybe 15 years ago. And it was like, and it was just that it's like your Kundalini awakening is every day. It's like, and that made sense to me because I was so habit daily habit driven with dinacharya. And one of the things, the terms that I've been using a lot is like the design is perfect. It's like and that's the whole embodied Kundalini. It's like the design is perfect. And we're just uncovering more and more of the design. And as we move through different phases of life and different stages of life, right? Like there's the design keeps changing based on that stage of life. So for those of you who are having babies, it's like the design's changing. For those of you who are, going towards menopause, it's like the design is changing. Those of you going towards death, it's like it's changing, but it's perfect in every state. And we get to embrace what that is fully, like explore the technology fully. And that's what should bring us to our mat or our cushion or our kitchen or our bathroom, is like that. What is the practice, the habit that is in that alignment now, right? That is aligning the technology. I love that, Brett. I'm so glad. The way you unpacked it. That'll be really helpful.
Yeah, and if people want a visual, I don't we see the iconography so much of the snake going up, right? I'm sure everyone listening is like familiar with that. Yeah. First of all, you do not have to think of it as a snake. That is totally optional. I do have an entire podcast on my podcast about snake iconography because I nerded out on this and did a ton of research. So if people wanted it, but if you don't want to think of it as a snake, you do not have to. But my favorite image, or the image I would invite people to think about, is there's actually a beautiful image of a double helix snake. And there's a snake going up, a white snake going up, and a black snake going down. And they're intertwined. And that is more resonant with the idea of an orbit. And that is more resonant to me of like, why are we going up? Oh, we're going up to connect with divine intelligence. And then from the tantric perspective, we're doing that to root all that wisdom into our body down through the chakra system. So it's an ascension and a descension. And you have to get good at both, right? You have to get good at going up, and you have to get equally good at grounding, all the grounding techniques, and bringing it into your body so that you can then live it out. So the two snakes instead of the one snake, if you want to think about snakes, for me has been very helpful. And I've been trying to share that image on social media and in my Facebook groups. I'm sure folks can find it somewhere.
Yeah. And it is, especially with Vata imbalances and how erratic energy moves, like Vata in the nervous system moves in jolts, right? When it's out of balance. And that's where the snake is so helpful, that's slithering, right? That has S curves, is smooth, the way water moves, circular as part of that S sound, sister as part of that S sound. It's a really soft, nurturing, feminine energy and it's in the catechus, right? It's like, that's the smoothness that we want in the operating system, not the sort of like jolty, linear, more masculine. And we see that a lot in, like PTSD release, where there's just those jolts are moving out, and often in a way that's opening channels through the electrical energy, nervous system energy. And then what happens afterwards is the integration, and that's smooth, right? There's that S sound again, like smooth, that it just evens itself out. And that's how we feel that experience of integrity and balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said.
Brett, we could talk for hours. I need to go to play Ultimate Frisbee. I'm stepping into Dharma as Ultimate Frisbee mom.
Well, I'm sure that will be super energy generating. Like you're probably going to feel inspired to do some like hard things in your business after that. You're just like, oh, I feel so good. My endorphins are so high. Let's, like write that bill that I've been terrified to look at or whatever.
Oh, that's great. Love it. Oh, I had one other, when you were talking about the money and the Lakshmi, Happy Money. Do you know about Happy Money? The Happy Money book? Oh my gosh, Happy Money, you guys. Like for anyone who has a hard time partying with money or paying, and I'm right in that category, and I had to read Happy Money and it helped a lot. Happy Money is a Japanese entrepreneur. It's his book based on his practice. And it's beautiful. And it speaks to the Kundalini, the movement, the S curve, the up, the down, the in, the out. It's all part of the same cycle.
I love it. I wrote it down, and it's so fun to have these conversations. I always walk away, inspired and with book recommendations. So that's awesome. So
me too. And I'm so psyched that you're singing.
Yes. More to come on that.
I keep having this hit that I want to do stand up. Like that comedy would be like the hardest possible thing for me to do because I walk that line of rebellion so strong, and everything I talk about is so highly controversial that I'm like, humor is clearly the best way.
I would lean into that. I would play with that, especially on social media. I feel like those types of content, right, would do so well. And, the more we show our weirdness and that true, like who we really are essence, it's like the right people will be so turned on by that. So I think you should do it.
Thank you. And I can't wait to hear your first album.
All right. Well, hopefully I'll be back soon. And thanks so much again for sharing me with your tribe.
When Brett comes back, we're going to talk about her new release coming out November 2023. No, December.
December. You'll get it earlier, but yes, new book coming out. So I look forward to that.
Awesome. Take care. So good to talk to you.
Bye.